My name is Benjamin Walker. I'm 35 years old, an environmental consultant from Phoenix, with a passion for solo hiking and photography. What I'm about to share happened 3 months ago, and I've debated whether to tell this story at all. Most nights I still wake up drenched in sweat, the memories too vivid to dismiss as nightmares. I need people to understand what's out there in the wilderness of northern Arizona. This isn't folklore or fiction. This is my warning to you. It started as a routine weekend trip. I'd been working overtime for months on an environmental impact assessment for a new development project, and I desperately needed to clear my head. Seligman is a small town along historic Route 66, surrounded by vast stretches of high desert wilderness, perfect for getting away from the city noise and reconnecting with nature. I arrived Friday afternoon, checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, and planned my hiking route for the following day. The desk clerk, an older man with leathery skin and tired eyes, noticed my topographic maps spread across the counter. "Planning to head north?" he asked, pointing to the area I'd circled. "Yeah, thought I'd explore some of the canyons up there. Heard there's some interesting geological formations." He frowned slightly. "Might want to reconsider. We've had strange reports from that area lately. Cattle mutilations on the ranches. Some hikers saying they heard unusual sounds." I smiled politely, assuming this was just small-town superstition or perhaps an attempt to steer tourists toward established trails. "I'll be careful," I assured him. "I've been hiking solo for 15 years. Got my emergency beacon and satellite phone." He shrugged. "Your call. Just make sure you're back before dark." That night, I had dinner at the only diner still open. The place was nearly empty except for a group of locals huddled in a corner booth, speaking in hushed tones. One phrase caught my attention. "Third one this month." They noticed me looking and immediately fell silent. I should have recognized these as warning signs. I didn't. Saturday morning broke clear and cool. I was on the trail by 7 a.m., breathing in the crisp desert air as I made my way north along a dried creek bed that wound between rocky hills. The terrain was rugged but beautiful, red rocks contrasting against the pale blue sky, twisted juniper trees clinging to impossible slopes, the occasional jackrabbit darting between patches of sagebrush. By midday, I'd reached a narrow canyon I wanted to explore. The GPS on my phone showed I was about 7 miles from town. Not too remote, I thought. I took a few photographs, had lunch on a flat rock overlooking the canyon, and decided to press further in before heading back. The canyon gradually narrowed, the walls rising higher on either side, casting deep shadows despite the afternoon sun. I came across something odd. Animal tracks unlike any I'd seen before. They resembled wolf prints but were unnaturally large, nearly twice the size they should have been. As a kid who grew up with a wildlife biologist father, I knew the native fauna well. These didn't belong. About half a mile further, I found the first sign that something was truly wrong. A deer carcass, fresh enough that flies were still gathering, lay torn apart in a way that spoke of neither natural predation nor human hunting. The animal had been ripped open with tremendous force, yet specific organs appeared to have been removed with precision. I snapped a few photos, thinking I should report this to Wildlife Services. That's when I heard it, a low growl that seemed to reverberate from the canyon walls themselves. I froze, slowly turning to scan my surroundings. Nothing moved in the still afternoon air. "Hello," I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of loose rocks sliding down the canyon wall to my right. I looked up to see a cloud of dust about 30 feet up, but couldn't make out what had caused it. Every instinct told me to leave. I started walking quickly back the way I'd come, repeatedly checking over my shoulder. The sun was lower than I'd realized, the canyon almost entirely in shadow now. I quickened my pace, cursing myself for ignoring the motel clerk's warning. I'd covered perhaps a quarter mile when I heard it again. Not just a growl this time, but a sound that started as a deep rumble and rose to something between a howl and a scream. It echoed off the canyon walls, making it impossible to tell which direction it came from. I broke into a run. The path narrowed between two large boulders, and as I squeezed through, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Something large and dark leaped across the gap above me. I caught only a glimpse, a massive silhouette against the darkening sky, but it was enough to send me into a full sprint. I ran until my lungs burned, the path becoming treacherous in the fading light. I should have been watching my footing more carefully. My right ankle twisted on a loose rock, sending me crashing to the ground. Pain shot up my leg as I scrambled to get back up. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. Standing on a rock outcropping about 20 yards ahead was a creature that defied rational explanation. In the diminishing light, it appeared as a massive wolf-like form, but its proportions were all wrong. It stood on its hind legs, easily 7 feet tall, with forelimbs that ended in what looked disturbingly like hands rather than paws, though tipped with long, curved claws. Its chest was broad and powerful, covered in dark, matted fur. But it was the face that will haunt me forever, a grotesque hybrid of wolf and something almost human, with intelligent eyes that reflected an unsettling awareness. It knew I saw it. It wanted me to see it. For several heartbeats, we remained locked in a mutual stare. Then it bared teeth that gleamed yellow-white in the dusk, teeth designed for tearing flesh, and dropped to all fours. I scrambled backward, pain forgotten, fumbling in my pack for anything I could use as a weapon. My hands closed around my hunting knife, pitifully inadequate against this monstrosity, but better than nothing. The creature began moving toward me with a fluid, predatory grace that belied its size. I backed away, knife extended, looking desperately for an escape route. The canyon walls were too steep to climb, especially with my injured ankle. My only option was to keep moving toward the canyon entrance and hope I could outpace it despite my injury. "Stay back!" I shouted, knowing how futile the command was, but driven by pure instinct. The creature paused, tilting its head as if puzzled by my voice. Then it made a sound, a chuffing noise that horrifyingly resembled laughter. I turned and ran, abandoning any pretense of bravery. My ankle screamed in protest with each step, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, I heard the creature loping along, not at full speed. It was toying with me, I realized with growing terror. The canyon began to widen, which gave me hope. If I could reach more open ground, maybe I could find somewhere to hide or climb. The last daylight was fading fast, though, and I knew darkness would give the predator an even greater advantage. I rounded a bend and saw a cluster of massive boulders ahead. If I could get on top of them, maybe I'd be temporarily safe. I changed direction, heading for the largest of the rocks. The creature seemed to realize my plan. It accelerated suddenly, closing the distance between us with frightening speed. I felt hot breath on my back as I lunged for the boulder, scrambling up its rough surface with desperate strength, fingers bleeding as they gripped the stone. Claws raked across my lower back as I pulled myself higher, tearing through my jacket and shirt, leaving fire in their wake. I screamed but didn't stop climbing until I reached the top, about 12 feet off the ground. The creature circled below, occasionally rising on its hind legs to swipe at me, but the boulder's overhang kept me just out of reach. In the deepening twilight, its eyes caught what little light remained, glowing with an eerie amber luminescence. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. No signal, as I'd feared. The satellite phone was in my backpack, which I dropped during the chase. My emergency beacon was clipped to the pack as well. I was trapped on a rock in the middle of nowhere, bleeding, with night falling and a monster, I had no other word for it, waiting patiently below. Hours passed. The creature maintained its vigil, sometimes pacing, sometimes sitting eerily still, but always watching. The temperature dropped rapidly, as it does in the desert at night. My thin jacket, torn and bloodied, provided little warmth. The pain from my ankle and the gashes on my back grew more intense as the adrenaline wore off. Moonlight eventually flooded the canyon, bright enough that I could see my surroundings clearly. The creature remained below, occasionally testing the boulder's sides for climbing routes, but finding none suitable for its bulk. Around midnight, a new sound echoed through the canyon, a distant howl answered by another closer by. The creature below me lifted its head and responded with its own terrible cry. They were communicating, I realized with growing horror. There were more of them. Within 30 minutes, 2 additional creatures joined the first. They circled my refuge, studying me with calculating eyes. One was notably larger than the others, with silver-tipped fur visible in the moonlight. This one seemed to direct the others with guttural sounds and subtle movements. They began taking turns trying to reach me, each attempt coming closer than the last as they learned the boulder's contours. I stabbed at their reaching claws with my knife, drawing blood once and earning a furious snarl in return. I knew I wouldn't survive until morning. They were too intelligent, too determined, and I was weakening from blood loss, cold, and fear. I needed a plan. My pack lay about 20 feet from the base of the boulder. If I could somehow reach it, I had flares that might drive them back long enough for me to activate the emergency beacon. It was a desperate plan with terrible odds, but my only chance. I waited until the creatures seemed distracted by something in the distance, perhaps a potential prey animal. The largest one barked sharply, and one of the others loped off into the darkness. This was my chance. I slid down the side of the boulder furthest from the remaining creatures, landing hard on my injured ankle. The pain nearly made me black out, but I bit my lip until I tasted blood, forcing myself to stay conscious. Moving as quietly as possible, I limped toward my backpack. I'd covered half the distance when one of the creatures spotted me. It issued a hair-raising growl that alerted its companion. Both charged toward me with frightening speed. I abandoned stealth and sprinted for the pack, grabbed it, and ripped it open. My fingers closed around a flare as the first creature reached me. I struck the flare and thrust it toward the beast's face. It recoiled from the sudden bright light and hissing sound, giving me seconds to fumble for the emergency beacon. The second creature circled behind me. I waved the flare in a wide arc, keeping both at bay momentarily while frantically pressing the beacon's activation button. The small device blinked to life, its red LED confirming that it was transmitting my location and distress signal. But now I faced a new problem. The flare would burn for only a few minutes, and I had just 2 more in my pack. I needed to find a more defensible position until help could arrive, if it arrived at all. I spotted a narrow crevice in the canyon wall about 50 yards away. Too small for the creatures to follow, it might offer temporary shelter. I backed toward it, flare extended, as the beast paced just beyond the circle of light, growling in frustration. The largest creature, the silver-tipped one, returned as I neared the crevice. It assessed the situation quickly, then did something that chilled me to my core. It picked up a rock in its hand-like paw and hurled it at me with deliberate aim. The projectile struck my shoulder with stunning force, nearly causing me to drop the flare. They were tool users, problem solvers. I reached the crevice and squeezed inside, finding it extended deeper into the rock than I'd hoped. About 10 feet in, it widened enough that I could sit with my back against one wall, facing the entrance. I lit a second flare and placed it at the opening, creating a barrier of light. The creatures gathered outside, occasionally reaching in with their long arms, claws scraping against the stone just short of where I sat. The silver-tipped one studied the situation, then began digging at the ground below the crevice entrance, apparently trying to widen the access point. My watch showed 2:37 a.m. If anyone had received my distress signal, help would still be hours away. I had 1 flare left and nowhere else to go. The second flare began to sputter. Beyond its dying light, I could hear the creatures' excited growls as they sensed their opportunity approaching. I readied my final flare and the hunting knife, knowing both would provide only minutes of protection. As the light faded, the largest creature thrust its hideous face into the opening, amber eyes reflecting the last sparks of the dying flare. I lit the final one, forcing it to retreat temporarily. Then I heard the most beautiful sound imaginable, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. The creatures heard it too. Their behavior changed instantly. The silver-tipped one issued a series of barks, and all 3 melted away into the darkness with uncanny speed. I crawled from my refuge, waving the flare overhead as the helicopter's searchlight swept the canyon. The light found me, and I collapsed to my knees in relief. The rescue team, 2 local search and rescue volunteers and a paramedic, reached me as the helicopter hovered overhead. They were clearly shocked by my condition, but worked quickly to stabilize me and prepare me for evacuation. "What happened to you?" the paramedic asked as they lifted me into a rescue basket. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," I managed to reply. "Try us," one of the volunteers said grimly. "We found what's left of Jake Pennington about a mile south of here. Been searching for him for 3 days. I told them everything during the flight to Flagstaff Medical Center. They exchanged looks I couldn't interpret, but asked detailed questions about locations and movements. At the hospital, after treatment for lacerations, exposure, and a severely sprained ankle, I was visited by two men who identified themselves as specialists from the Department of Agriculture's Wildlife Services Division. They recorded my statement, took photographs of my injuries, and collected the torn remnants of my jacket for analysis. Has anyone reported these creatures before? I asked as they prepared to leave. One hesitated, then nodded. There have been incidents. Nothing as direct as your encounter. Most witnesses don't survive to give statements. What are they? I pressed. Officially? Unknown predatory wildlife. Unofficially? He trailed off, exchanging glances with his colleague. There are things in the wilderness that science hasn't properly classified, things that have learned to stay hidden from humans most of the time. Will you hunt them? I asked. We'll investigate, he replied carefully. But these creatures, they're intelligent. They'll be long gone from that canyon by now. He was right. A follow-up expedition found the area deserted, though they discovered a cave system with disturbing evidence of long-term habitation, including human remains. DNA analysis of blood samples from my knife came back with results classified as inconclusive and anomalous. I've since learned that northern Arizona has a long history of unusual predator sightings, dating back to early Native American accounts. Most are dismissed as folklore or misidentifications. I know better now. I sold my house in Phoenix and moved to Chicago. I don't hike anymore. I don't venture into wilderness areas. At night, when the wind howls around my high-rise apartment, I still wake up in terror, feeling hot breath on the back of my neck and hearing the scrape of claws against stone. They're out there. They're watching, and they're far more than mere animals.